This is the Eye for an Eye channel. Welcome to today's show. Humanity's demise has been plotted for quite some time, and obviously we've seen some of the events that have recently occurred that affect our lives, but I was recommended a video from 1973 called Computer Predicts the End of Civilization. And in this video clip, it's pretty hilarious that in 1973 they were pointing at the year 2020 for something major to occur to reduce the amount of people walking the earth. Now, I don't know if you remember the year 2020, but something did actually occur. And since then, it's been pretty much event after event after event that's occurring, coinciding, of course, with the year 2030, where the United Nations has let us know that everything needs to reset by the year 2030. So these are all coincidences, of course. And this clip is absolutely hilarious because in the year 1973, this aired on the BBC, BBC News, by the way. They're talking about the Club of Rome. I just referenced the Club of Rome in the video I did on why this new trend is occurring about Rome and men, how often they think about Rome. If you didn't see that video, I uploaded it on this channel. You could check it out. It's important because a lot of these things are obviously not a lot of these things. All of these things are created by the media, created and put into your head for a reason, right? They seed plant. They put these thoughts into your mind without you even realizing it. And the Club of Rome is getting mentioned in this clip. And of course, the Club of Rome is being mentioned, the climate's being mentioned, and now overpopulation is a problem even in 1973, and how disastrous it's going to be by 2020 if something's not done. So conveniently in the year 2020, something was done. And of course, we see more and more going on, but them telling us about how we need to emit, how carbon emissions are a real problem. And, people just go, yeah, carbon's a problem. We got to emit carbon. And they forget about that old sentence or that old saying about how humans are carbon-based life forms, right? Yeah, because the carbon they want to get rid of is you. But look at this video clip with this old school computer, even then, telling the demon in the computer, telling everybody out there how they need to control the population.
It's not some science fantasy effect from 2001. This electronic display, emanating from Australia's largest computer, is a picture of the condition, past, present and future of planet Earth. The program was originally devised by a scientist working from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, Jay Forrester. It was developed under the auspices of the Club of Rome by an MIT research team to present a complex model of the world and what we humans are doing to it. The program, called World One, doesn't pretend to be a precise forecast. What it does for the first time in man's history on the planet is to look at the world as one system. It shows that Earth cannot sustain present population and industrial growth for much more than a few decades. It shows that simply cleaning up our car exhausts and making some small effort to limit our families simply isn't enough. It's like an electronic guided tour of our global behaviour since 1900 and where that behaviour will lead us. Well, this is the printed version of what we've just seen on the television screen. And what looks at first to be just a maze of computer characteristics is really a system of very simple graphs which project what's going to happen to the planet over the next 150 years if we don't do something drastic to stop it. Down the left-hand side of the graph is the date, 1900, 1940, 1980, 2020, right down to 2060. Now, each of these lines of letters represents a curve showing some aspect of the condition of the planet. The further out this way they go, the greater that figure is, the further this way, the less. For example, P represents population. So here it is at 1900, and then it comes up to 1940, it starts to take off. Here we are at 1980, up to the turn of the century, and then it starts to peter off. Let's now have a look at this next curve, the Q curve, which is the quality of life. And this is represented by, for example, the amount of space people have, the amount of money they have to spend, the amount of food they have to eat. Now, it increases rapidly up to 1940, but from 1940 on, the quality of life diminishes. And here we are about the turn of the century, and we come up to the year 2020, and it's really come right back. More people, of course, means that you start to chew up your supply of natural resources. and this is this curve here, the N curve, and it shows that slowly but steadily the pool of natural wealth in the world, natural resources, minerals, oil and so on, is slowly but steadily diminishing. So this is the situation. As population increases, the quality of life decreases and the supply of natural resources decreases. But have a look at this curve here. This is called the Z curve, and it represents pollution. Now, predictably enough, as the population increases up to 1980, pollution increases. There's more rubbish. But from 1980 to the year 2020, pollution really takes off. This is assuming, of course, that we don't do anything about it. So the year 2020, the condition of the planet starts to become highly critical. And if we don't do anything about it, this is what's going to happen. The quality of life is going to go right back to practically zero. Pollution is going to become so serious, right out here, that it will start to kill people. So the population will diminish. Right back here, less than it was in the year 1900. And at this stage, round about the year 2040, 2050, civilized life as we know it on this planet will cease to exist. Well, hopefully, of course, it won't be allowed to happen. But it's taken this kind of shock treatment to nudge governments into doing something, and slowly we are. We're starting to clean up our atmosphere. We're starting to recycle our rubbish. We're doing something positive about population control. But so far, our efforts have really been just a drop in the ocean. The Club of Rome comprises some 70 men of widely varying backgrounds, but their common concern is that the world problems cannot be solved by individual nations. I spoke with Professor Hugo Tiemann, director of the Battelle Institute, Geneva, Dr. Aurelio Pache, founder of the club, and Dr. Alexander King, director of the World Bank and the United Nations OECD. Dr. King, now you're describing the world as a closed system where all these things are interrelated, and yet the government, the control of the system is by individual nation states. Now, how do you convince them to cooperate?
The sovereignty of these nations is no longer as absolute as it was. There's a gradual diminishing, whittling away of sovereignty, little bit by little bit. Especially, of course, in the smaller countries where it's more obvious. But the bigger countries have to do a good deal of this by agreeing to international arrangements for the law of the seas, or for the limits of fishing, or for control of the wavelengths in radio, and 101 other things. But especially in the technological field, I think this is going to be increasingly so because of developments next year. I was at an important meeting in Washington a couple of weeks ago, and Peterson, the former Secretary of Commerce, was saying the same thing from an economic point of view, that the general world economic situation, the interdependence of countries on their food and fuels and so on, is leading to an interdependence which has seeds of draining away of sovereignty within it. So I don't think one can envisage an idealistic of jumping to a world federalism or anything of that sort. But the building up probably in the next decade in a number of particularly sensitive fields like energy, raw materials, the use of the oceans, space and so on, of a number of what people are tending to call regimes, which will not be ordinary United Nations type of organizations, but semi-management organizations. There'll be a great deal of consent in them.
Dr. Pache views the European Common Market as an elementary example of the kind of regional cooperative which is going to be necessary. What responsibilities does he see for Australia?
Australia, you are in a splendid position.
What should we do?
You have food, energy, space. You are distant from other centers, so you can, for a longer time, feel rather more independent than interdependent. But things of the world are going so fast that I think that an enlightened leadership in Australia should see down the road that Australia will have to lose some of its on self-decisions in order to acquire something else which may be purely political in very wide sense, or maybe also security.
The Club of Rome is reluctant to point the finger at any one nation. Yet clearly, nations like the United States, which consumes approximately 60% of the world's resources, will, in the club's view, have to accept a severe cutback in its voracious appetite. But the club's utterances are cloaked in a velvet democracy, in the hope that their facts will gently persuade.
We will ask who is making the decision, and whether the decision makers of today, whether they perceive the problems, what kind of problems, and the interactions of the problems. That's a very pragmatic approach.
Has the time come, Dr. King, when we're going to have to say we can no longer entrust our resources and the exploitation of those resources to private enterprise? Has the time come when governments will simply have to take more control?
Simple nationalization and things like that wouldn't help at all, because we've got to keep an incentive approach. And many of the good aspects of private enterprise are very necessary here, but not in the old exploitative way where the market forces dominated the whole situation.
Dr. Pichai, can you tell me what my lifestyle will be in 100 years' time? What sort of car I'll drive, what sort of house I'll live in, what sort of food I'll be eating?
Probably you will have a smaller car. You will use more common transport means. You will work many far less hours. You will have a wider cultural possibilities that today. You will not be so much pressed by immediate needs, because through technology, organization of the markets, the basic needs will be taken care of. And I think that you will love nature and continue then what I think you are doing now to protect our environment, to avoid this man-made world where the creatures of nature, the animals, the plants, the green spaces, the wildernesses are bound to disappear.
To the Club of Rome, the status symbols of the year 2000 will be the inverse of today's. Prestige will stem from low consumption. That personal consumption will have to be less is plain enough, but for that privation to be seen as prestigious would seem to indicate some radical rethinking, at least for the fat cats of the planet.
Pretty incredible stuff, right? How 2020 lined up perfectly with that. I mean, you know, it must have been a coincidence that specifically in the year 2020, something else went down. So I guess in 1973, well, I guess it's all just a huge coincidence, right? Because that's how all this stuff works. It's all just a huge coincidence. And anybody who questions the coincidence is, of course, a conspiracy theorist and a nut job, right? Because it's easier to just say that than to actually observe the stuff that they're showing us and saying to us, especially when they use secret organizations. Like, did those guys look like legit nice human beings, or they look like a group of scumbags who call themselves the Club of Rome, right? Meeting in secret, all these people do over and over again. The rich, the wealthy, same difference, politicians, corporations, etc. And their biggest concern is the population. Now, people in the population, their biggest concern is how they're going to afford eggs or afford milk, etc. every day, pay for their groceries. That's a day-to-day problem that people are having. These people, they don't have that problem. You know what their problem is? You and me. And they want to eliminate us, and they tell us flat out because they want to control the population. And then when they talk about the environment and littering and pollution, everybody just seems to think that that's a real world problem that's going on, when the only people causing those problems or any problems are them with geoengineering, etc., with the climate. But again, the carbon they're trying to reduce is you. You're the carbon they're trying to reduce, but human beings apparently in 2023 are not smart enough to figure that out. So interesting, right? That video, of course, got recommended to me. I got a kick out of it, even just watching him with a marker going through the computer telling us the year 2020. I guess he's got a crystal ball. That computer really knew what was going down, right, in the year 1973. I mean, this isn't stuff that they've had plotted out and planned for a long period of time, with 2020 being a target goal and 2030 being the next one for things to be completely reset. So if you could do math, we're heading into 2024. We got about a 6-year window here, not to mention the fact that they did want to speed it up to 2025. So that would really just give us like a whole year for a lot of chaos to actually go down. But again, the population's a huge problem. What can they do about it by the year 2020? Oh, wait, something did happen. in the year 2020, and it's continuing to happen as we speak. So pretty amazing. These are not computers figuring this stuff out. These are not smart intellectuals figuring out. These are sick satanic scumbags who aren't figuring it out. They're plotting it out right in front of us, and they get away with it. I thank you for being here, everybody. Hope you're all well. God bless you as always and your families.